Good morning, everyone. My name is Loudermilk, and I have the honor of introducing my dad, Barry Loudermilk, this morning. And because I am closely related and I know a lot about him, I always have to consider what to tell you about Barry Loudermilk when I'm introducing him. And I'm always thinking, okay, I can tell you about his service in the military, in the Air Force. I think that's very important for you to know. I can tell you about him being a small businessman, owning his business for the past, I think, 19 years, just having to deal with the changes in the economy and the things since then. I can also tell you about him serving in the State House and the State Senate for the past 9 years and standing firm for the principles he believes in. But I really thought this morning there were just 3 things I wanted to tell you. First of all, why he's running. When he was first announced, he was asked by someone who was very skeptical about us being able to change America and restore it. And he said, I truly believe we can restore this nation. And they said, if I showed you a crystal ball, and I said, there is no way we are going to fail as America, we're going to lose our freedom, would you still run for Congress? And would you still spend your life trying to change it? And he said, yes, because first of all, I do believe we can change it. But second, even if we're in chains someday, I want my grandkids to be able to say that their grandfather gave every last breath in defense of the freedom they should have. That's the reason that he's running. The reason I'm supporting him, well, I'm his daughter. But also, early on, when he first decided to run, we decided to run together as a family. I said, I will be there. I will be there in the office. I'm there almost 5 days a week in the headquarters in Woodstock. I'm there on the weekends going door to door. And someone recently said, Christiana, do you have a life other than this campaign? And I said, no. And they laughed. I'm like, great, no life for you. And I said, no, I might not have a life right now, but if I don't do what I'm doing, I won't have a future. That's why I support my dad, Barry Loudermilk. And lastly, I asked a college student that's on our team before the last place I spoke, and I said, why do you support him? Because I wonder about the young people and just others on our team. Why do you support my dad? He said, because with Barry Loudermilk, there is no question where he stands. There's no gray area. Basically, I want to introduce to you someone who's not occasionally bold, but who consistently stands firm. And that's my dad, Barry Loudermilk.
I thought we could just keep her going. I mean, I really appreciate Christiana, and every person in my family shares this deep-rooted commitment that we have, that we must take back America. We have lost America as the way that we knew it. I'll just share a little bit about myself. There's some of you that maybe we haven't had a chance to get to know. Most of the people in here are either supporters or we've been around for a long time. I grew up in Georgia. I grew up in a little town called Riverdale. It used to be a real small town south of Atlanta. And we grew up of very moderate means. My dad was a home builder. And you know, I grew up in a time that was a lot different than what we have today. And I was an all-American boy. I mean, I got up in the mornings, on the weekends when I was real young, barefooted out the door, was gone all day playing in the creek with my friends, doing things that today probably people would tell you that you're not supposed to do. I mean, we rode bicycles barefooted without helmets, knee pads, and elbow pads. And you know what? If we fell off and got hurt, that was our own fault. We never thought about suing somebody for it. When I was in high school, I had a gun rack on the back of my Ford F-150 windshield with a .22 and a shotgun on it that we went to school every day, and the coaches came out and shot with us after school. Today, if you point your finger like this, it's considered a Class 2 mock-up of a gun, and you can go to jail. When I was old enough, my dad had me on the job with him on the weekends because he worked hard. He was from a different era. He was a veteran of World War II, a medic in the Battle of the Bulge and D-Day, who, you know, he saw the worst of humanity. He saw the worst of what men can do to one another. But he was a visionary who believed in this idea of American exceptionalism, and he instilled that in me, and he told me the most important thing that you can do is stand firm for what you believe. But you have to know what you believe, and more importantly, you have to be able to define why you believe what you believe. When you can do that, then you can stand against any opposition. Something else my dad told me growing up was, no complaining, son. I never want to hear you complain. And that was a standing rule in our house. Now, my mom didn't listen to it quite often, but we knew who the real boss was there. But my dad used to say, I don't want to hear any complaining. Because complaining never accomplishes anything. If there's something in life that you do not like, you have two choices. You can do something to change the situation, or just accept it as inevitable and go on with your life. But never let me hear you just complain. You see, my dad came from that era that we were self-sufficient. Liberty was important. I mean, during that time that I grew up, it was a different world. It was a time when the First Amendment protected your freedom of speech and your freedom to carry a Bible into school or wherever you want to. Not that the Bible has become the attack of those groups who are offended by it. It was a time when it was honorable to stand up for what is good, what is right, not what is offensive. It was a time when we learned to love liberty and learned to love freedom. That's an era that my children haven't gotten to know. I've told them about it, I've written about it. But I believe we can take it back. I believe we have to take it back. Right after I announced I was running for Congress, I was speaking at a high school baccalaureate service, and the pastor who was introducing me, as he was walking up on the stage, he said, Barry, I know you're not here to speak about your run for Congress, but I think it's important that these people know that you're running. And as he was walking up on the stage, he came to where I was sitting. He said, in one sentence, tell me why you're running for Congress. And without hesitation, I pointed to where my kids were sitting. I said, because they deserve better than what we're passing on. If you want to get to the heart of why anybody is running for office, ask them why they're running for office. Most of what you're going to get is what they're going to do when they get there or how they're going to do it, but very rarely you're going to hear someone honestly say why they're running for office. Simply for me, is because the first grandchild I have coming in May, deserves better than what she's going to inherit from us. And I have to do everything I can to help turn this nation around. When I graduated high school, my dad, in my senior year, my dad, he was a builder, and work was really bad here in this area. He was from that era that if there's no work where you are, you just don't sit by and let somebody take care of you. You go to where you find work. Well, things were booming in Anchorage, Alaska. There was a lot of building going on. So my dad headed up to Alaska, began working, left my mom at home with me while I finished high school. Now, I thought this was pretty cool. I had it set. I had 2 offers to play college football. I figured my dad's gone. I got the summer off, going to go play football. My mom's going to move up with my dad, and I'm in here in Georgia alone. This scenario is working out very well. 2 weeks after I graduated, my dad sent me my high school graduation present. A one-way ticket to Alaska with a note that said, son, come work a winter with me in Alaska and it'll make a man out of you. Well, I went to Alaska, begrudgingly a little bit, but I decided I'm going to get up there, I'll work the summer, come back, play football, and go on with my life. But 2 things happened when I got up there. Here was a 17-year-old boy working in the bush in Alaska, making $15 an hour in 1981, with all the overtime that he can work. And when you're working out in the remote areas, you don't have anywhere to spend that money. I learned the value of hard work and putting aside money. And the other thing that really changed my life was as I was working in a bus ministry at a church on the weekends, I met a young lady who's standing in the back there, and just last month we celebrated our 31st wedding anniversary. From Alaska, I came back to Georgia. I actually moved to Texas, and I like extremes, from Alaska to Texas, 65 below to 110 degrees, working construction. I was on the way home from work one day when I heard about the attack of the Marine barracks in Lebanon. Greatest loss of life of U.S. Marines since Iwo Jima, and I was mad. I got home, I called my dad, I was complaining about it. My dad heard me complaining. He said, so son, what are you going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? And I started thinking I knew exactly what he meant. So I sat down with Desiree, my wife. I said, look, my dad served in World War II. My brother served in Vietnam. I think it's time for me to serve my nation. Now, I was expecting to hear what I should have heard. What? You married me? You pulled me away from my family? We're here married for 6 months. Now you're going to go off and join the military? And she looked me in the eyes. She said, well, let's go visit some recruiters together. Spent 8 years in the Air Force working intelligence. Went to work for a defense contractor. Then I came back to Georgia and started my own business. And then driving home from work one day, I heard about a bill that passed the Georgia General Assembly. And it made me mad. because it took away some of those freedoms, those liberties that I learned growing up were so important. I called my dad again and was complaining about what happened. He said it again. What are you going to do about it? So I ran against a 28-year incumbent Democrat in the Georgia House of Representatives and defeated him. Spent 6 years in the House, 3 years in the Senate. And let me tell you today, there isn't a day that goes by that something in Washington, D.C. doesn't make me mad. And I hear the voice of my dad, who's gone on now, says, what are you going to do about it? Folks, this is the most dangerous time that we have ever lived in this nation. The most dangerous time. Do you realize the debt that we have incurred in this nation because of the irresponsibility of Congress? Because they don't understand the basic principle. As a small business owner that I understand every day, I can't spend more than I bring in and stay in business. They have run up a debt of $18 trillion. Now let me define how much $18 trillion is. If you were to go back to the birth of Christ, 2014 years ago, and at the moment Jesus was born, you deposited $16,000 in the bank. And every 60 seconds after that, you deposited another $16,000 in the bank. So that's every minute from the birth of Christ, you put $16,000 in the bank. Today, you still wouldn't have $18 trillion. That's how massive the debt that Congress has accrued has become. It exceeds every dime that is produced in this nation. It is a national security threat. Just the interest that we paid on the debt alone last year, we could have bought 2,700 F-35 fighter jets that cost $151 million apiece. Just on the interest that we paid on the debt that we're throwing away. We must have a balanced budget in Congress that is a constitutional amendment to force Congress to live within its means and quit borrowing from our children and grandchildren. I'm proposing a balanced budget. We have to do these things logically, with business sense. A balanced budget amendment that Congress passes that goes into effect in 2030. A date certain that forces Congress to move in the direction of getting to a balanced budget, but without destroying further the economy of which Obamacare has so successfully done. Let me tell you, there's a lot of, I'll take a couple of questions on issues here, but there's a lot of good people running in this race. I know most of these people. Some of them have supported me in the past. I've been on some of their campaigns in the past, served with some in the legislature. There's no doubt there's good people running in this race. But this year is the most critical election in the history of the United States of America. This year will determine whether we have the fortitude to stop and say no more and start turning this nation back around in the direction it should go, or are we just going to continue down the path of destruction that we're going? We're 73 days away from the first step in this very critical election. We are seeing organizations arise across the nation and getting engaged, conservative organizations getting engaged in primary elections that have never been engaged in primaries before because they understand we have to send people to Washington, as Christiana said, who are consistently firm, not just occasionally bold, that not just stand up for something when you can make a headline, but is also willing to stand firm when you're just going to take the criticism of the big business and the big lobbyists and the special interests, fight against you. Because of my experience as a small business owner and understanding the overregulation of government and how it's destroying our small businesses, in fact, this for the first time in American history, small business is less than 50% of our gross domestic product because we declared war on small business in this nation. This class warfare has continued on into business to where we have now two classes of business. Those are too big to fail and too small to succeed. But because of my experience in fighting to reduce government regulation, Madison Project came out and endorsed me very early on in this race. Because of my commitment to religious liberty and those basic fundamental ideas of our founding fathers, Concerned Women of America identified me as one of their first candidates. Because of my commitment, as John Adams said, this Constitution is for religious and moral people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. Because of my stance on traditional family values and fighting for them in the Georgia legislature, Family Research Council stood up and said, we're going to endorse Barry Loudermilk in this race because it's so critical. A new organization began, Restore Our Republic, which is made up of the top conservative members of Congress now who've been fighting the fight. They said, we need to go across the nation and we need to find those who are committed to restoring our nation back to a constitutional republic. When they looked at all the candidates running for Congress across the nation, I was the first candidate that they endorsed. A couple of weeks ago, Family Research Council called and said, we want you to come to Washington, D.C. I'm sorry, Freedom Works. Freedom Works. Everybody knows that Freedom Works. So we want you to come to Washington, D.C. We're going to introduce you to the national press as one of the top 5 conservative candidates in the entire nation. We know that to turn this nation around, we have to have bold leadership, who has a vision, who just like our founding fathers, doesn't look at the circumstances that surround them, but they look at their cause, and they put their cause and their vision, a vision of a free America ahead of everything else. They also understand that we have to have a strong national defense. That's why last week, the National Defense PAC came out and endorsed me in this race. Georgia Right to Life has endorsed our campaign, but one of the ones that is most important to us, that means the most, is when Eric Erickson came on WSB radio and 5 different times said, I'm supporting Barry Loudermilk because he has shown to be the only one in this race who has consistently had the courage to stand up, even against his own party, big business, and special interests, to do what is right to restore liberty to America. I know we can turn this nation around because I believe in American exceptionalism. I've stood firm in the State House and State Senate, even had to go against my own party when they were wrong. Let me close with this. In the Battle of the Bulge, Germany was just running right through the American forces. They had what was known as the Great Bug Out. My dad was involved in that campaign. The 101st Airborne was sent to Bastogne, the 82nd was sent to St. Viv with the orders of hold these towns at all costs. There was a tank commander who was coming down a gravel road getting close to St. Viv as the force of the entire German army with their Panzer tanks was right on his tail. And as he came down the road, he saw a lone American private on the side of the road just casually digging a foxhole. The tank commander stopped and he had all these GIs that had bailed on top of the tank because every town they came through, they were in a heavy retreat. The tank commander opened the hatch, he hollered over at the private, and he said, excuse me, Private, is this the way to the rear? Private Martin stood up, laid his shovel down, and he said, sir, are you looking for someplace safe? He said, yes, I am. And Private Martin said, well, pull that tank behind me. I'm 82nd Airborne, and this is as far as the Germans are going to get. One man, because of his courage, and he looked at his cause, not his circumstance, and with the courage to stand against all odds, he was willing to take on the entire German army for a cause he believed in. He so inspired that tank commander. They turned that tank around and said, we'll make our stand here. When the next group retreating down the path got there, they said, this is where we'll make our stand. It became a stronghold in the Battle of the Bulge, holding the German army on. We are the Private Martins. We can turn this nation around because I believe in American exceptionalism, and I believe we have to do this today. We have the momentum in this campaign right now to win this race. We have not only the endorsements, we have the support all across this district because people see the vision that we have and that we can take back America. But I need your help. We're 73 days away of making history. I believe we've got the momentum where we can win this thing outright without a runoff, but I need your help to do that. Wouldn't it be nice to not have to get phone calls and hear radio ads and TV ads for another 60 days after the primary? I need your help to make that happen. God bless you. Please visit our website, standwithbarry.com.
2 minutes for questions.
Senator Loudermilk, my question is founded in history as well as clarity because we seem to be speaking about a lot of that this morning. As you know, Georgia made history this week with voting on Article 5. And so The clarity I'm asking for you is I want to understand your stance on term limits, because I'm not sure where you stand there. And I'd also like to ask you as a follow-up, what is the constitutional basis of which your decision is rendered on such?
Regarding term limits.
Exactly, and of course, Article 5, having spent years in the Senate.
In fact, I got a text from Scott Turner just last week that said, hey, you just passed a bill in the state house. And I'm thinking, I resigned. How did I do that? Well, it was actually an Article 5 bill that I was the top co-sponsor with that had passed the Senate and passed the House that called for a balanced budget amendment. Our founding fathers understood one thing. Congress will never vote to cut its own budget or cut its own power. When you look at every amendment that's passed in the history of the United States, every constitutional amendment has restricted state powers, not congressional powers. Congress is going to have to be forced into a balanced budget amendment, and Article 5 was put into place for a time such as this, and that's why I supported the Article 5 for a balanced budget amendment, a convention to go forward. And my name is on the bill. I believe if we get close enough, with enough states doing it, it will force Congress to do it itself. That has happened in history before. The other thing, the question was about term limits. You know, our founding fathers debated term limits. They had some very heated debates about term limits because one side, Jefferson, said we need to have, as he called, rotation. We need to have frequent rotation or these people will become corrupt. Adams and some others were on the other side and they said, yeah, but that's just more government dictating to the people who they can send. So they saw it as big government or more law. Let me tell you something. I support term limits, but this has brought up something else. Do you know how many laws? Our biggest problem is we have too many laws right now. I guarantee you that. That's why the first bill I introduced in the legislature was a repeal. Repealed the requirement for you to give a fingerprint just to get a driver's license. The majority of the bills I've introduced have been to reduce laws and repeal. I love it when another candidates, they get up and they talk about how many bills that they've passed and are passing. I think we need to get rid of it. In fact, I was speaking to a group of attorneys at a fundraising event recently, and they said, Barry, do you know on an average day, every American violates about 40 federal laws and they don't even know it. Too many laws. Term limits. Our founders did not push term limits because during that time period, the people were engaged in paying attention to what was going on in the nation. Just as Jefferson identified at the beginning of our revolution, the greatest danger they faced wasn't the British Army, it was the lethargic people. So they focused on wakening up the people. I believe we need term limits now. The argument, the debate needs to be around what is that term limit, because I can tell you this through experience, if the term limit is too short, it empowers the appointed bureaucrats. Because you lose those that have the institutional knowledge of those elected officials. If you want proof of that, go to Arkansas. We've got such low term limits that most of the elected officials in the state of Arkansas now don't have a clue what's going on. It's empowered the appointed bureaucrats. And of course, if you make the term limit too long, then they tend to become corrupt. But yes, I do support term limits, and I think we need to have those, but we need to have the debate on what is the proper term limit time. All right, thank you. God bless you.